Hello, everyone. This is Patrick Morrison from the Wolfpack Astrobiology podcast, and in today's video series, we'll be discussing the origin of life. First, to give some broader context, the Earth, as we know it, formed 4.6 billion years ago when a Mars-sized planet called Theia crashed into the proto-Earth, spewing debris into space that coalesced to form the Moon, which marks the beginning of the first eon in Earth's history, which is known as the Hadean. The oldest rocks we have on record are the Acosta gneiss, which date to 4 billion years ago. This marks the end of the Hadean and the beginning of the Archean eon. Earth's surface would have been molten at the time of formation. However, there are crystals known as zircons, which have been dated to 4.3 billion years ago. Because zircons can only form in liquid water, we know that by the mid-Hadean, the surface had cooled sufficiently for liquid water to exist. The oldest fossils we have are microbial mats known as stromatolites, which date to 3.5 billion years ago. However, these are also in the oldest sedimentary rocks, and since sedimentary rocks are the only kind that can preserve fossils, in all likelihood, life had begun even before this. The oldest biosignatures we have are carbon-13 depleted graphites from the Isua and Aquilia formations in Greenland, which date to 3.8 billion years ago. We consider these biosignatures because when organic carbon is produced by biotic processes, the lighter carbon-12 isotope is preferred, leaving the resulting organic matter with less carbon-13 than the source material. This gives a roughly half-billion-year span in which life could have begun on Earth. Before asking when and how life began, we must first ask ourselves, what makes something alive? In order to be considered alive, an entity must have three characteristics: metabolism, replication, and compartmentalization. In this video series, we'll discuss the origin of all three. In modern organisms, compartmentalization is provided by the cell membrane. Replication is allowed by the presence of genetic material, which conveys information from one generation to the next, and metabolism is carried out by a diverse array of proteins known as enzymes. On the modern Earth, all life comes from existing life, and this presents a sort of chicken and egg problem when asking how life began. Going back to Darwin's time, it had been hypothesized that life came from a sort of primordial soup of organic molecules dissolved in water, which filled the ancient oceans, lakes, and rivers. Modern organisms utilize four varieties of biomolecules: carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. These are essentially versions of simpler organic molecules, namely sugars, amino acids, fatty acids, and nucleotides that have been joined together in long chains, also known as having been polymerized. But where would such molecules have come from on the early Earth? The famous Miller-Urey experiment demonstrated that if lightning was passed through a reducing gaseous mixture, and it had long been hypothesized that Earth had a reducing atmosphere, amino acids will be produced. Early organisms would have been much simpler than modern ones, and would have used much shorter chains of molecules known as oligomers. But there's a problem with the primordial soup hypothesis. This has to do with the second law of thermodynamics, which states that the entropy of a system must always increase. Metabolism and reproduction decrease the entropy in living systems, and as such, life requires an environmental disequilibrium to move towards equilibrium for a net increase in the total entropy of the system. This disequilibrium can be chemical, as in oxic versus reducing, pH, or acidic versus alkaline, and energetic, as in photic versus thermal energy. A primordial soup would consist of monomers, and polymerizing these into protobiotic oligomers would decrease the entropy of the system. The problem here is that there would be no disequilibrium to draw from, since the primordial soup is already in equilibrium. But there's another problem with the primordial soup hypothesis. This is that it never existed. Analysis of the oldest rocks show that the primordial atmosphere wasn't reducing, but inert. This is because zero-valent or metallic iron, iron-2 or ferrous iron, and iron-3 or ferric iron exist at equilibrium concentrations at the core mantle boundary. However, metallic iron is the most dense variety, while ferric iron is the least dense. Because Earth is a relatively large terrestrial body with a strong gravitational field, more metallic iron will go into the core, while more ferric iron will go into the mantle. With an excess of ferric iron in the mantle, electrons have to be obtained to reach equilibrium with ferrous iron. The electrons would have come from gases such as hydrogen, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen sulfide, producing water, carbon dioxide, molecular nitrogen, and sulfur dioxide, which would then have been released by volcanoes to form the primordial atmosphere. With an inert atmosphere, mechanisms by which organic molecules can be produced, let alone concentrated, are limited. Asteroids and comets are known to contain organic molecules, and these would have fallen to Earth regularly during the Hadean. However, reactions between UV light, iron, water, and chlorine-based salts would produce reactive oxygen species, or ROS, and perchlorates. These would then break down meteorically derived organic carbon, preventing it from becoming concentrated. So, what is needed is a means by which carbon dioxide in the environment can be reduced to produce organic carbon. This mechanism has to be localized to sufficiently concentrate the organic carbon to stimulate prebiotic chemistry. The difficulty in concentrating organic carbon on the prebiotic Earth has led to speculation that the first life was autotrophic, with early metabolic networks having grown out of carbon fixation reactions. And this brings us to our next section, the origin of metabolism. But first, what is metabolism? Metabolism refers to the sum of all chemical reactions within an organism. As with all chemical reactions, a metabolic reaction has to have a negative change in Gibbs free energy to occur. The change in Gibbs free energy, or delta G, is equal to the change in enthalpy minus the product of the temperature and change in entropy. If a reaction has a positive change in Gibbs free energy, it won't happen. Proteins, known as enzymes, act as catalysts which lower the activation energy of a reaction, allowing it to occur under biologically relevant conditions. Enzymes require complex biomolecular machinery to be produced, and this could not have been present on the prebiotic Earth. In lieu of enzymes, it had been hypothesized that catalytic RNA sequences known as ribozymes carried out a similar role 4 billion years ago. Ribozymes can be produced from much simpler starting material than enzymes, but to get to that point, carbon dioxide first has to be reduced to produce organic molecules, and these have to be assembled into biomonomers, such as nucleotides, and then polymerized to form ribozymes. Here, we will explore how this might have happened. Today, the vast majority of organic carbon, originally derived from carbon dioxide, was produced via photosynthesis. However, Fischer-Tropsch type reactions are a method by which organic carbon can be produced abiotically. Here, a carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide molecule binds to a transition metal catalyst such as iron, nickel, ruthenium, palladium, or cobalt. Hydrogen will then reduce the carbon to form an alcohol group. Adjacent carbon atoms with alcohol groups will then combine, releasing their hydroxyl group as water to form an alkane or hydrocarbon chain. The steps in this process are highly reminiscent of the Wood-Young-Dahl pathway, which is used in acetogenesis, which is also one of, if not the oldest extant metabolic pathway. Furthermore, many enzymes involved in the Wood-Young-Dahl pathway possess iron-sulfur clusters, used to facilitate the transfer of electrons from hydrogen to carbon. While Fischer-Tropsch type reactions most often occur in industry, they have been documented in natural settings. Deep beneath the surface of the ocean, there are volcanic vents known as black smokers, powered by water coming in contact with magma and becoming superheated. This water is acidic, and the black plume is composed of iron sulfides, which precipitate out as the water column cools. While these are the most abundant variety of hydrothermal vents, they are far from the only one. The other major kind of vent is known as a serpentinizing vent, or a white smoker. This system is powered by water reacting chemically with ultramafic rocks such as olivine and pyroxene to produce serpentine, magnetite, and hydrogen. White smokers are alkaline, and the white plume is composed of calcium carbonate. Black smokers also release hydrogen, which was originally dissolved in the magma, and both varieties of vents have iron sulfur minerals such as greigite and mechanowite, both of which have a similar crystal structure to the iron sulfur clusters which are found in enzymes. These minerals catalyze Fischer-Tropsch type reactions, but so far only methane has been observed being produced in volcanic vents. While a far greater variety of organic molecules have been produced in white smokers, making them a better candidate for the cradle of life. However, there are still problems such as that the abiotic production of organic carbon takes place at temperatures and pressures that are too high for any life to survive.